Welcome to Wicked Weapons. I'm Jared, and I'm joined by Matt and David. And this is a show where a couple nerds and a gunsmith talk about all of history's sharp metal sticks and things that go boom. We're no experts, but we're definitely enthusiasts. And just a disclaimer, we're new at this. We hope our quality gets better in future episodes. So thanks for listening, and without further ado, here's the show. So, Greek fire. Either of y'all know much about it. Matt, you know some about it.
Very some. I mean, I would just tied it together. I mess with like the napalm. Making just always only things I've heard is similar to that. But nobody really knows what it is or what the formulas were. But that was about as I've seen a little bit. They'll tie into shows here and there on the you see History Channel and stuff. But
yeah, David, how about you?
Yeah, pretty much not making it, but pretty much the same as far as like knowing that there's some theories about and just taking things that act similar and how that they described Greek fire, like how it would float on water and burn on water, or even being underwater and stick to things. People have theorized, like a mixture of different chemicals or substances rather. But we don't know the exact composition. We don't know even if these are the substances they used or what. Got a best guess, basically.
Yeah, so like Matt, pretty much everything I know about it before doing this, of course, was pretty much just like off of the History Channel, like History Channel just playing and mentioned it. So I guess we'll get into the document here. So I'll take the introduction. Despite the common name, Greek fire was a medieval chemical incendiary mixture used in naval warfare by the Byzantine Empire, also known as the Eastern Roman Empire. I really thought that was interesting, just that colloquially it's known as Greek fire, even though it was actually the Romans who were using it.
that would make more sense, though. I mean, they were always the top technologically in that era.
Talking about the Romans were?
The Romans, yeah. Especially in their creation. I mean, look at the structure designs and how everything worked.
I mean,
Colosseum, things like that was just insane.
They straight up had like heated baths and stuff. Like,
oh yeah.
They were way smarter than I think we give them credit for. But
not to mention their unique methods of torture and killing.
Yeah.
Hey, maybe we can get into that in some future episodes.
Hey, that's
the ultimate weapon.
Well, I mean, they use it in the interrogation of people. I mean, it is a weapon. It's a form of psychological. All those freaking torture things they did, and they were masters.
Yeah. So Greek fire, chemical mixture. It was used between 672 AD and 1453 AD. It was also commonly referred to by other names, including liquid fire, sticky fire, sea fire, Roman fire, war fire, etc. Pretty much any preface you want to come up with and then say fire after it, and that fits, I guess. So according to writings from rival nations of the Byzantine Empire, it was reported to have the following characteristics. It could burn on water, in water, or some accounts state that it was ignited by water. Some writings state that few substances could extinguish it. Notably, it is stated that sand, strong vinegar, and old urine could be used to extinguish it. I want to know...
Old urine. It's not just new urine.
Yeah, I want to know who was on that boat and was like, oh crap, it's Greek fire, get my jar of urine.
But you think about it, they would use barrels as their bathrooms in a lot of the old boats,
right.
Old ships down in the bottom. And as urine sets and breaks down, it becomes more ammonia based as it evaporates.
Oh, yeah.
A lot more ammonia, so there could be more.
Maybe the ammonia, because ammonia is like gaseous, right? Like it's a kind of fumes.
Yeah.
Maybe that pushes the oxygen out or pushes the oxygen away.
Just like the getting stung by a jellyfish, it's the ammonia in your urine that's actually easing the sting from the jellyfish.
So yeah, old urine.
Urine.
If anybody ever recreates the original formula for Greek fire, just keep a jar of urine on you.
And if we keep going on this, you're probably going to hear me say this a lot, but the time frame that you were just saying what that is in me, we have got so much lost technology. That keeps coming out every day. You just see something, and it's even the smartest minds that we have today. The Teslas, they're like, I have no idea, and
Yeah. Like the Tesla coils and stuff, Nikola
yeah,
Tesla's
oh yeah,
inventions, that stuff. I feel like the world would look really different if
oh
he
no
had,
doubt. Nobody had to pay for electricity.
yeah,
I mean, that's half your world battles is for
yeah, for
electricity.
sure. Greek fire was a liquid substance. Grenades and earthenware pots were filled with it. And that's the grenades and stuff is actually kind of going to come into play with some of the theories on what it was made out of,
Well,
because we'll kind of get into that.
well, you had mentioned back on the I guess before you go on the next one that it was ignited by water. I don't know if you've seen these, but the old miners' lights was calcium carbide. I think, which is a dry rock that they would put in the bottom. It was a little metal canister you put in the bottom of that, and then the top of it held water. And when you moved a little switch, controlled how much water would drip from the top canister down onto the little calcium carbide rocks, and they create. I think it was methane or acetylene. I think maybe it was acetylene. I can't remember exactly which gas it creates, but then they would light it, and that was their headlamp for coal miners back in the day.
Oh,
So,
wow.
so it's anytime water comes in contact with the calcium carbide, and they would control the brightness just by how much water was being dripped into it. You can look at them. I mean, those were way back in our great grandparents' days of working in the coal mines, but that was their headlamps. But it was reacted by coming in contact with water. But that would very easily be something that could be incorporated into your grenade or whatever that you then
Yeah.
threw in the water after you've applied this petroleum-based stuff that's floating.
Yeah.
Toss that out in it, creates water, heat, bang, boom, there's your fire. Pretty cool. I didn't even.
I'll have to look that up and see if you said calcium carbide.
I believe that's what it is because I think they were called carbide lanterns.
Okay.
Um,
I'll have to
I'm
look
pretty
and
sure
see, because that
they're really
could
cool.
very well be something that like the Byzantines had access to,
Yeah,
That's a lot of, so like the investigations to try and figure out what Greek fire was, and we'll get into this later on in the doc, but a lot of the investigations into it, they all have to be like, what would they have had access to at that time?
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, calcium carbide is probably something that is made naturally if it's a rock.
right.
I'd have to assume. So they might have had access to it. So the last characteristic is that on naval ships, it was ejected from a siphon or a nozzle. I basically like to think of it as like reverse firefighters hose. Like they're
Right.
shooting fire out of this thing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And it was accompanied by quote unquote thunder and much smoke. That's also going to come into play with what people kind of have some theories on what it is. So its invention is attributed to Callinicus, an architect from Heliopolis, Syria, which in 672 was overrun by Muslim invaders. However, Theophanes, the chronicler that attributed this invention to Callinicus, when it's talking about like this time period, anytime it says the chronicler, it's literally just somebody that like writes stuff down to keep track of history. So Theophanes also has writings mentioning fire carrying ships several years prior to his writings on Callinicus. So it's debated when they actually developed Greek fire and when they actually started using it. So that's definitely a factor to consider, that they don't even know when it popped up first. That being said, do either of y'all want to take design and function?
Yeah, I can. I was gonna actually mention, and I was just kind of thinking through this, and maybe it changed over time, but I wonder if they had like technically a different composition depending on its use case. Like in the grenades and earthenware pots, maybe it was a certain type that maybe reacted with something else than water, or maybe it reacted with water, and maybe the ones coming out of the nozzle were just, I think later in the dock you had like a little fire would be lit under the pipe or under the cone or whatever, where it would come out and it would ignite it. I wonder if there was technically maybe a slight different composition depending on what it was being used for and in.
That
Now we don't know that. I just kind of thought about it, especially maybe in their early days, because it was saying Theophanes. Is it Theophanes? Just I'm gonna go with it.
your guess is as good as
Probably
mine, but
Probably Theophanes. But
Theophanes, yeah,
um,
that sounds more Greek. So
Maybe it was changing during the time he wrote about fire-carrying ships, and then on his writings with Callinicus. So maybe it was changing at that time. Maybe it was the same the whole time. It's just something I'd kind of thought about, thought I'd
yeah,
mention.
that's actually a pretty good idea. I mean, that really could be a possibility.
Well, if you also look at, obviously that it's floating on water, so it's got to be of some sort of petroleum. And then you look at all your different oils, they've all got certain flash points,
Yeah.
just like your olive oil or vegetable oil. So if they were to have it in a container that had a valve in it, they could heat it up to the flash point already. So when it comes out, it's already, as long as there's a fire in front of it, everything that's connected to it is now, as long as it had enough pressure to be blowing it out so it wasn't sucking back into the tank,
Yeah.
it'd be launching, it'd be a free flamethrower from World War II and Vietnam battles.
Yeah. And yeah, we'll get into that actually here shortly as David reads through this.
So, design and function. The ingredients of the liquid substance known as Greek fire were such a closely guarded secret by the Byzantine Empire that the composition of it has not been replicated to this day. In fact, it is thought that the knowledge of it was so compartmentalized that some had knowledge of the mixture, some had knowledge of the specific parts of the siphons. As proof of this, Bulgarians captured 36 siphons and quantities of the substance in 814, but were unable to make any use of it.
Yeah, so I thought that was actually pretty interesting because basically the whole Greek fire thing is actually a combination of that liquid mixture mixed with however they were able to actually pressurize it, shoot it out, ignite it. And I mean, you can see that just by they literally had enemy nations that captured their equipment. And they actually captured some of the, I think they called them like siphonari, or the guys who actually operated these weapons. They even captured some of them, but it was like so compartmentalized that one guy only knew one thing about it. He only knew this is how you mix the mixture. And the other guy only knew, oh, well, you have to pump the air bladder however many times to get it to the right pressure.
So no one person had the full secret to all of it.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Like Coca-Cola. Sorry.
Yeah.
I think
Right.
there's like 2 people who have, or 3 people, whatever it is, that have the actual recipe. Other than that, no one else. All right.
That's crazy. I didn't know that.
I've heard that. I've never verified it, but
That's my cousin. He
could
works for Coke. I'm gonna have to ask
he
him.
might know.
I never heard that. I never heard of that. That's pretty cool.
As said earlier, at sea it was ejected from tubes or nozzles called siphons, which were attached to specialized ships called dromones. It is theorized that there would typically be a furnace at the bow of the ship, which would kind of go in line with the oil. The furnace would have an active flame which would heat a container, likely made of bronze, that the Greek fire or liquid fire was in. The heat, as well as a hand pump that led into the tank, would pressurize the contents. From this container would be a tube or nozzle that, when used, would eject the ignited substance. When a release valve was turned, the pressurized substance would shoot out. Beneath the nozzle would be a small flame that would ignite the substance as it exited the siphon or nozzle.
I'm just now realizing that throughout this whole doc, I'm constantly saying something or nozzle, something or nozzle.
Good.
So yeah, for visual listeners, like if we post this to YouTube, I'll put this diagram up on the screen. But yeah, it just kind of shows that it's like this bronze tank sitting over a furnace, and they have a bellows pushing oxygen to that fire to get it hotter. And the hand pump that they show on here is like a little, almost like a bicycle pump, but what they probably would have used at that time period would have been something more akin to like a whoopee cushion, like a bladder of some kind of leather sack that they'd be.
I love that you said whoopee cushion.
Yeah, right. It's a good, but yeah.
You love
That
what?
does look.
Who's got gas? I do.
Yeah, blowing into a fire. I don't know if you've seen these on. I think I've seen them, ran into them on Facebook, but it shows these guys over in China, like creating stuff like the old ways. I mean, it might take them a year to make some soy sauce or whatever, but these guys, when they're making fires, they've got a bellows on the side of it that's like a big tube, and then it's got a baffle in it, and then it looks like cowhide that's made a valve on each side, so they can sit there and just like move their hand back 12 inches and forward 12 inches in both directions. It's a constant pump of air pressure making their fire hot enough to smith with, melt metal.
Pretty cool.
So they could even use something like that to pressurize in that tank. I don't know how high of a pressure, but technology from that time frame.
Yeah, like I said already, I mean, I just really think that in the modern day, we just don't give enough credit for how intelligent they were. Yeah, so Matt, do you want to take over from here?
Sure. However, this theorized design is debated. Howden and Byrne experimented with this design in 2002. Even with modern welding technologies, it was a struggle to prevent the bronze tank from rupturing due to the pressure. They were able to utilize it with some modifications, producing a flame at 1000 Celsius, which is 1830 Fahrenheit, reaching a range of 15 meters, 49 feet. Their experiments used a mixture of crude oil and wood resins.
So Howden and Byrne, I should have put it in the document, but they worked on a show called Machines Time Forgot, and that might have been on the History Channel, I'm not sure. But they were kind of the ones that theorized this mechanism. And I mean, it's written down somewhat in some records that they found, but they tried to recreate it based off of, like I said earlier, what Byzantines would have been capable of at the time. But even with them doing modern welding on that bronze tank, it would still rupture from the pressure of it.
Mm-hmm.
And the modifications they had to do, I'm trying to remember exactly what they did, but they like moved where the pump fed in, and they moved where the siphon would have come out. So they made some changes to get it to work, but obviously they were eventually successful. And I genuinely believe that their mixture of crude oil and wood resins probably was the most accurate, because to me, if I was a Bulgarian at that time and in a naval battle and they were shooting fire at me from 50 feet away, I would think that was like the wrath of the gods.
For sure.
So foreign just to be like, oh my gosh, they're harnessing. I mean, they could make fire in their fire pit, but they're harnessing liquid fire that's blowing out at me. Like, you would freak out.
Well, if you even look at, I mentioned earlier, World War II, Vietnam, the flamethrower guys just utterly scared everybody to death. Those guys had like an average life of like 20 minutes or something like that. Once the battle, because they're the one everybody's going to be trying to shoot them. I mean, so they would use that technique. They would use that tactic, though, as this guy's trying to go here, we're flanking left, flanking right, doing whatever, because everybody's focused on him. And I remember my dad mentioning, I haven't never looked this up, but when he was in Vietnam, they had them bigger on top side of tanks, like huge pressure, and they would blow outside of a cave with the thing, and it would suck all the oxygen out of the cave, and pretty much whoever's in there is dead without having to do anything else. Would just an intense fire on the outside created the oxygen.
Yeah, because a lot of caves
they didn't have a good enough
on the cooler side too, so I'd imagine that temperature differential would assist in that pressure.
It's such a psychological freak you out deal. So especially back then, like, man, they got a dragon on that boat or what?
Yeah, if you want to keep going, Matt.
Yeah, there are also reports of portable projector, a medieval flamethrower called and I will never pronounce that one.
I think it's
siphon,
but we can call it
Cheerio
siphon.
Cheerio, yeah. Well, that's what popped in my head when I saw it too. Or hand siphon. They're stated to have commonly been used against siege towers and to break enemy formations on the battlefield. The written records state that the substance used in these was the same ignited fuel used in the stationary versions used in naval warfare. Illustrations from the time depict them this way as well. Howden and Byrne disagree, however, as they think these were the most likely just syringe-like weapons that contain the unignited liquid fire and other noxious substances. So
their theory,
hitting them with a fart bomb.
Yeah, it's probably that old urine stuck in a syringe.
The old urine. Yeah, that'd work.
Yeah. So Howden and Byrne, their theory on this was basically just that it's you know, a syringe that they filled it with like stinky stuff or like the unignited liquid fire, it may have still been hot. You know, like you were talking about the flash points, like maybe they heated it to that flash point and then shot it out.
I don't know that you could do that with a syringe type. I mean, because you're
holding it,
talking 400
you
or
know.
500 degrees at least
Yeah.
to reach those flash points. So you'd almost think that one would be they just like poured it on you and then ignite it something, you know, have a torch, a buddy with the torch,
Yeah.
torch you with the stuff and then throw a flaming stick at you or something, you know. I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. So this picture here is a depiction of a guy using one of these hand siphons. And honestly, to
He's got
me,
really little feet.
yeah, for sure, he's like
Like
peg
the
leg.
picture, I was like, yeah. I was
To-
looking at the gun projector thing, and I was like, man, it's just kind of comical.
To me, it really makes me think of the ray gun from Call of Duty Zombies.
It does. Well, that's what I was thinking.
But
That's how it was. It projected that goo out of that thing.
it kind of looks like, because he's got his hand on the grip, right, and then he's got his other hand up beside it. So I almost wonder if it was like hand cranked. You know, obviously
That's
this is
kind of what it
just,
looks like. He is cranking it, but
this is
drawing.
just like a picture somebody drew. So I mean, maybe they
That,
might
or
have
he's like
been.
showing the back, and he's like pushing a syringe
Yeah,
forward or
Yeah.
something.
yeah. I could still see the syringe thing being the case.
If this was the way it looked, it'd be that would also be odd. Like they're holding this
Yeah,
odd shaped weapon, shooting this
Yeah.
weird liquid out of it.
They're just
Probably
like, hey,
stank.
I'm back from the future. I got a hair dryer.
right. Yeah,
Gotta
right. Yeah.
I'll take this next paragraph. In its earliest form, it was said to have been used in ceramic grenades. They would wrap the ceramic grenades with cloth. It is theorized a flask or vial of the Greek fire fuel mixture would be placed in the grenade. And if you look at the pictures of their little grenade, it's got like that opening on top.
hmm
So I almost think, well, let me finish reading this and I'll get into my little theory. So it's theorized a flask or vial of the Greek fire fuel mixture would be placed in the grenade. They would ignite the cloth and fire it from a light catapult. So it's not like they were hand thrown like hand grenades. They had,
hmm
you know, Roman catapults.
Which would track if it was a heated oil.
Yeah.
hmm
So it was most likely in Onager. I hope I'm saying that right. A seaborne variant of a Roman light catapult, capable of throwing a load around 13 to 20 pounds, a distance of 380 to 490 yards, which
Freaking ducking it. I mean, you know the range, the rifle range here at the house. I mean, if you could throw two
yeah,
milk jugs, launch that all the way to the back of the property.
yeah, I mean, that'd
That's-
be,
I mean, back then, it'd be pretty crazy.
yeah.
Looking Duncan for sure.
I mean, I definitely think
Yeah.
it probably was that Onager thing, because I mean that was a catapult that they did use. I didn't look to see what time period they used that around. I should have looked at that to see if it kind of lined up with that Greek fire usage. But so
This was a gladiator. They used them, so that would have been wrong.
my kind of theory on how this would have operated as a grenade is I almost think that it was like a Molotov cocktail. I mean, that's pretty much exactly what it is. You know, they ignite the cloth and throw
yeah,
it.
for sure.
And I guess the impact would rupture that vial and let that mixture ignite.
If it
What
was
are these
pressurized
little-
just enough to pop out.
What are these little what's that game where you throw the ball up and pick up all the little star looking things?
Trick. Oh man, what is that?
I know, I can't think of it, but that's what those
Some
look like.
jacks.
Yeah.
Something jacks.
Yeah. What are
Those are multiple. They would use. I mean, they've used them back. I mean, you'll see them for either thrown out on flattening tires on vehicles, but those would be rusty. Like they're basically like horse nails that they would bend out, and then they would throw those out. And when soldiers that just have like leather whatever,
Yeah,
those would
right
pierce
through it.
in, and then you end up dying slowly from tetanus.
Well, and you end
So
up like
but it
walking on them and stuff. Those are caltrops.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Okay. But yeah, and it does the same with horses. It'd maim their horses. It'd maim the cattle pulling or ox pulling whatever.
Yeah.
and it's a long, slow death because they didn't have any way of treating, tetanus and all that stuff.
Hmm.
Yeah, they did some nasty stuff to people back then.
No, man. Well, they still do.
Yeah.
Just
I
different.
say. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it just doesn't go on record now.
Yeah, right.
So
Not yet, at least.
might need to watch our tongues on here. We don't know.
I know, right? I was about
Uh,
to say something. I was like, no, better not.
Me too. So, as stated earlier, it is still unknown exactly what the mixture was made of, which brings us to the theories on composition. As far as these go, I guess each one of us can kind of cover one. I'll do this quicklime. So the quicklime, the claims that the mixture would continue to burn on water or that it was ignited by water inspired the theory that quicklime could have been the primary ingredient. Quicklime has an explosive reaction when it comes in contact with water. The problem is, of course, the grenades and hand siphons are not stated to need water to work. So you were mentioning the grenades being used in Gladiator. That is actually kind of accurate because the grenades and the hand siphons were predominantly used not in naval warfare but in ground battles. And also, experiments in 1932 showed that the reaction between water and quicklime would not be as long lasting and as destructive as Greek fire is stated to be in the open sea. I think of it more as, have you ever seen like the francium, like in chemistry class or something? The teacher will show a video of somebody dropping a ball of francium into a gallon jug of water or something and it like explodes, but then it's done. That's kind of what quicklime would have been like.
Just shake my. I can read the calcium phosphide. Calcium phosphide. One proposition that is worth an honorable mention suggests that Callinicus discovered calcium phosphide. Upon contact with water, it releases phosphine, which ignites spontaneously. Laughably, this theory posits that Callinicus would have discovered calcium phosphide by boiling bones and urine inside a sealed container. Experiments with calcium phosphide also could not reproduce the raw power that is indicated in written record of Greek fire in use. Man, we can't get past that urine.
Yeah, I know. It
Dude,
keeps coming back, man.
They are creative with the urine, man.
Well,
There's
I don't
something
know.
special about that stuff.
Do y'all know about the Roman like concrete that they used? They used their urine in that like concrete mixture, and that's them making that like concrete mixture is a big part of why all their structures and stuff are still standing.
Right.
So I guess we need to be
That's
moral
crazy.
of the story. We all need to start playing with our pee a little bit more and see what we can do with it.
Well,
There's
if there's
so many
ever
highs
a
better.
survival to the end of the world survival, you know that your pee is very valuable, apparently. Just don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
Right?
That's crazy. All right. Saltpeter. This theory is very popular with long-lasting theory based on the description of thunder and smoke. As saltpeter was used as an early form of gunpowder, the distance that the fire was projected from the siphon would also suggest an explosive discharge. However, saltpeter was not used in medieval Europe or the Middle East until the 1200s, almost 600 years after the first report of Greek fire being used. The behavior of this as a fuel for fire is fairly different from the, quote, liquid fire or sticky fire described in most accounts.
Yeah, so like you being a gunsmith, I mean, you know how gunpowder operates.
Oh, yeah.
So a lot of the written reports claim that the use of Greek fire was accompanied by much thunder and smoke. So it was like a loud roaring boom and there was a bunch of smoke. But yeah, so
Well, that
I
would
mean,
go back to their siphons. I mean, if you pressurize, depending on how high their pressure what they were able to get,
yeah, you let
back
that
in,
pressure loose and it shoots out.
and the pressure of the roaring fire coming out at high speeds is
And I
pretty
mean,
loud. I mean, it's kind of, I don't know if you ever watched the guys messing with like diesel truck injectors. You can have like a bucket of diesel fuel and drop a lit match in there and it'll just go out because it's
yeah,
oil. It's
Yeah.
more, it hasn't been refined all the way down, so it's still oil. But for it to ignite in the truck, you know, they don't have spark plugs. They got glow plugs, but it's the pressure that they have to build it to when they blow it out the injectors. And you watch them do it. I mean, it's just a loud roaring fire. But they're just holding the injector or it's out, you know, out in the shop, and they're blowing the fire up in the air, and it's super loud. Just that pressure and fire all combined.
So I
I can
guess is
definitely
that
see
why
that.
diesel engines are just like louder,
Yeah, I mean,
by
it's gotta.
default?
I mean, they're just. Yeah, I mean, they're working built different way. I mean, I don't know all the details of it, but I just know on that. I mean, that's how they're able to be so efficient, is because it takes just a little bit of fuel at high pressure to create a bigger combustion.
Yeah, so I'll take petroleum or crude oil. Perhaps the strongest contender for the base ingredient of Greek fire is crude oil. An alternative name for Greek fire was Median fire. Crude oil was also known to the Greeks as Median oil. Moreover, the Byzantines would have had easy access to crude oil from naturally occurring wells around the Black Sea. It also would fit many of the characteristics of Greek fire. I mean, as y'all know, crude oil is pretty sticky. I mean, every time there's like an oil spill, it's you pretty much can't get all that stuff cleaned up. So what I personally find to be the most likely explanation and the most widely accepted theory by experts today is that Greek fire was a mixture of crude oil, resins, and possibly quicklime or saltpeter or something was used in addition to it. But I really think that crude oil and wood resins, I mean, that's what the Haldon and Byrne guys used in their experiments, and it seems to me like they were able to pretty accurately replicate. And I know from working where I work that resin fires can be pretty hard to put out. Resin's a lot like oil. You were talking about, like, they have to be heated and pressurized up to a certain point before they'll actually catch fire. But if they get there, it's hard to put it out. And resins also would have acted as a thickener, and they would have helped it to be pretty sticky.
That's
I wonder
Go ahead.
if what's the flash point or the burning point or whatever of resin, the wood resin. Is it higher or lower than?
It's very low because you look at
Okay.
like because it's big down here, and we got it. Like we call it fat wood, and I think they call it lighter wood. It's like when a pine tree dies but doesn't fall down or doesn't get cut down, all the resin from the entire tree comes down to the stump. So it's just like the bottom 2-3 foot, or even a limb that dies on the tree. Give it a couple of years or a year or whatever, go out and break it off, and out the bottom, the wood is going to smell like turpentine. It's really compacted with all the resin, and you can just hit it with a lighter and it'll take off, and it burns really hot. Really, it's one of the best fire starters
Right. Okay.
you can use.
Gotcha.
So yeah, it takes nothing to ignite it.
I think if that would have played a factor in what temperature they would have heated it to.
Sure. Yeah, they wouldn't have to heat it as much if they could get it to a low flash point.
Yeah, and then once that was burning, the oil would catch fire
Catch fire
as
from
that
that.
burnt.
Right.
I wonder if that extended its burning potential, like when it was on top of the water, or
Right.
when it to stick to things, the oil would stick more, and then it would catch fire as the wood resin was burning.
Yeah.
And they can carry that safely, the crude oil not
A
being
lot
as
safer in a siphon.
yeah, the crude oil wouldn't be as dangerous just by itself, and then the resin is, as long as you keep it from catching a spark, they're not having to have a constant fire going on the boat with a big tank of exploding stuff sitting on top of
Because all
it.
it would take is another ship hitting them. And they're dead.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
know. It's like that. I was thinking that earlier. I was like, man, these dudes, these are from tough dudes, because it's like you're on a suicide mission.
Well, and that's
You
what
might win the
was
war for them, but you're still odds are
Yeah.
you're not coming back.
that's what was kind of cool about reading about the Siphonari is it's like they had these specific, naval soldiers that were like specifically trained on this one thing.
Right.
Let me read y'all this. It's a quote they found from 1108. It's regarded as like a partial recipe for Greek fire, but it says, and obviously this is a translation. This fire is made by the following arts. From the pine and certain such evergreen trees, inflammable resin is collected. This is rubbed with sulfur and put into tubes of reed, and is blown by men using it with violent and continuous breath. Then in this manner it meets the fire on the tip and catches light and falls like a fiery whirlwind on the faces of the enemies.
Those dudes have stronger lungs than I do.
Yeah, I know. I'm like 49 feet. Ain't no way my
Right. I couldn't blow out candles on the cake if it was more than 2 feet from me.
so yeah.
I'll do the hot water bladder challenge.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
Oh man, I'd always heard if you messed up doing that you could blow out
your lungs. Yeah, I ain't gonna try it either.
No, dude.
I'm good.
I've seen the strong men do it. You know, at those. You know, they always came around to the churches, you know, showing crazy strength. And that was one thing they always did was blow up one of those bladders. It's like, oh my gosh.
So the only concrete thing that we know for sure is that the knowledge, the true knowledge of what exactly the mixture was and how the devices used to eject the flaming concoction worked, all that knowledge died with the Byzantine Empire. So as far as effectiveness, Greek fire is considered to have been a major contributing factor to winning the Byzantines' countless naval battles. Yet while Greek fire's importance to the Byzantine Empire cannot be overstated, it is not considered by experts to have been a quote-unquote ship killer. In its siphon-deployed version, it could only be used in favorable winds and on calm seas. It also had a limited range. Muslim navies eventually developed strategies for dealing with it, such as keeping out of range and covering their ships with hides and furs soaked in vinegar. I don't know, do either of y'all know what the significance would be of the vinegar if it was like a oil?
I didn't know if it just didn't evaporate as fast as water would, and that's why they used it, so it would just stay. But I don't know. That's pure guess.
Does vinegar repel oil? I'm trying to think.
Yeah, I mean it's like the number one cleaner for a house.
Maybe it repels oil then.
It cleans our floor better than any chemical we ever use. Just
right.
Vinegar. I could see that, I guess.
Let me look that up.
Man, you could smell, dude, these had to be the smelliest wars between old urine and vinegar and whatever else, burning oil and throwing urine soaked stuff at people. I was like, man, this wives didn't want these dudes coming home from war.
Google says vinegar and oil don't easily mix because they're made of different types of molecules that are attracted to their own kind. That totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Oil and vinegar, like Italian dressing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like you can shake it up and it'll mix a little bit for a short time, but it always repels each other eventually. But if it's
when you look at it like that,
a soaked fur with the vinegar and then oil's hitting it, maybe it's bouncing off some, and then like you said, vinegar wouldn't evaporate as quickly as water, and so it was helping to stifle the fire at the same time.
Yeah,
I don't know if vinegar wouldn't. It was just a thought that
good thought.
So I know that,
and maybe that they could have it in tanks available.
Yeah, they'd have.
I mean, not that there's not seawater available. I don't know why, but who knows?
Yeah, I don't know. As far as like the favorable winds and calm seas, I mean that kind of makes sense. You don't want to be.
Oh man, yeah,
burning your own.
Especially, I mean, we still don't really know how far they were able to use them. But yeah, I mean, it really would not take long or much wind to make you just beside yourself out in the whole boat with you.
Yeah. Another thing that I didn't really put in the document, and I should have, a lot of what I read like about the effectiveness was almost more like the fear factor. So like you were talking about World War II and Vietnam.
Yeah.
The flamethrower guys, like the enemies being so scared of them that they were specifically targeting them. A lot of the written reports, they would, the Romans didn't do anything that wasn't ornate. They would literally build like gold or bronze, like animal heads around the furnace up at the bow of the ship. So it was like, from the enemy's perspective, it was this giant golden like lion or like dragon head breathing fire onto them.
All right.
So I mean,
that bonds of Satan coming across the water here at us.
Yeah. But
I mean, if you can imagine seeing that coming through just the smoke. I mean, if you ever hear stories of the Vikings, them chanting in the fog to other people were just like, I mean, they were so feared and scared before these behemoths come swinging in on boats and, masters of what they do.
Yeah.
And dying to battle is the greatest honor they could have had. So have at it, they're
Yeah.
coming at you. So, I mean, all of that psychological warfare, I mean, that's snipers. That's the number. That's why you can have one sniper that can change the entire battlefield
Yeah.
because nobody's going to stick their head up. You see your buddy right beside you head detonate because he peeked over. Nobody else is going to do that again. So yeah, that psychological stuff will win the entire war.
Yeah, for sure.
As its own weapon itself.
I mean, Greek fire, I'm sure it was actually pretty effective. Yeah, obviously you're in a naval battle, and I mean, yeah, it might burn on water for a little while, but I'd imagine eventually water would put it out. A lot of the experts on this stuff, like, they didn't really consider it to be like they fire it on a ship and that ship is done. It's like that ship might be distracted for a little bit trying to put it out. And obviously eventually the Muslims are one of the Byzantines like most common, or were one of the Byzantine Empire's most common rivals. So I mean, eventually after them encountering it so many times, they're like, oh, we know about this. This doesn't scare us anymore. Does anybody want to take the final paragraph and we'll kind of do our concluding thoughts?
Yeah. So where is it now? Most forgotten weapons have been completely forgotten, but because fire is such a common tool of war, the only thing forgotten in this case were the exact details of how the Byzantines made it and used it so effectively. The comparisons between Greek fire and modern-day napalm are clear. While we may never be able to figure out what exactly they used to make, we certainly have alternatives. While Greek fire may have been forgotten, fire itself will most likely always be part of warfare. And now it's against. I think you can fact check, but I think it is now against Geneva Convention to use flamethrowers.
Pretty sure it is.
Yeah, I think that was after Vietnam.
Yeah, it seems like such a brutal
Oh
way
yeah.
of doing
Oh
it.
yeah.
For sure.
One thing I actually forgot to mention as far as the napalm comparisons, I can't remember what group called it this, but crude oil, and it's actually still used at work. A lot of the raw materials that we get in are like oil-based stuff, and they still use the term naphtha to describe oil. So like naphtha is like the original name for crude oil, and obviously that's kind of where the napalm comes from.
And like, is that anything like, you go to Lowe's and the paint thinner and buy just straight? I think it's just naphtha, like a paint thinner or something like that.
Yeah. Let's see. It's spelled NAPHTHA, naphtha. It's like a paint thinner or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, for sure. I feel like Greek fire is definitely like a medieval napalm.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
But obviously, I don't know what the effective range is for like modern day flamethrowers.
I don't think it was very far. I mean,
yes. No more than 50 feet, give or take. Maybe.
Yeah.
65.
I mean, maybe the ones mounted on tanks and stuff, I'm sure could do some
a little higher
crazy
up,
stuff.
for sure.
Yeah. I still don't have a clue. I'd never looked that up.
Am I understanding right? Like, does napalm have that kind of sticky factor where it like kind of?
Yeah, that was that. I can't remember, and I'd love to hear somebody's reel on it, but I always thought that they would do those in like a double. Like there was one bomb that dropped that was the napalm itself, and another one that went off that ignited it. So it was like a delayed. You had the spray of the stuff and then it going, or I could be totally wrong on that, but yes, it was. That's why it was so effective in Vietnam. Was that bamboo and all that. That stuff just sticks and burns.
Yeah, so I mean, for sure, this particular topic, I feel like really just kind of carried on. I don't think it ever like really stopped being used. I mean, obviously they don't have we don't have exactly what mixture they used, but honestly, I think napalm is probably more effective than it really was. And the other thing is, like, that fear factor probably played into some of the descriptions. You know, like a lot of those older records are very exaggeratory and
Oh, sure. Yeah.
If you're on a ship and they've just shot it at your ship, and you also see it on the water, like it burned forever because you were so distracted, probably trying to put the flame out on your own ship. So who knows how long it actually burnt? And then, like you said, the fear factor. Once they told someone else, and then someone else told the person who wrote it down, or whatever, it gets exaggerated more.
Oh, for sure.
So, either of y'all have any like closing thoughts you want to get out there?
I think it'd be fun to play with some of that stuff, but man, that'd be a scary one because one small mistake.
Yeah.
So that's where I was like, man, those guys that were in those crews or on that boat were just like, man, here we go.
I don't know, man. I guess worst case scenario, just treat it like a jellyfish sting. Just pee on it.
Pee on it. Yeah, right.
Save your old urine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Run around with bags of it hanging around your neck.
Oh.
Like the garlic necklaces for vampires.
Vampires. Yeah.
All right. Well, I think this went really well, and
yeah.
I guess we'll do this again in a week or so.